So, Alicia, what is one of the most embarrassing things that you have done that you are embarrassed about?
The worst. I have many, but out of all of them, I think back in the day, at UNA, way back then, I was in my dorm, and I had been constipated for about 2 or 3 weeks. And it's because I wasn't, I was doing the whole eating disorder thing, so constipation soon follows after that. And so I waited until I knew that nobody would be in the bathrooms, just like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I did an impromptu, or no, it wasn't really impromptu, it was more planned. I did one of the biggest shits I think I've ever seen. It was
Bigger than the other one here?
It was big. Or when there was no flushing this thing.
I couldn't flush that one!
No, you don't understand. It's bad.
Were you taking anal? Is that why it was so big?
No.
Okay.
No.
Alright.
It was bad. So, I decided, you know what? We live in a dorm room on a floor with like 20-something other girls. It'll be fine. It's anonymous. So, I leave my mystery dropping and I leave. I get up the next day. Everything's fine. Everything's great. I go downstairs. I enjoy my day. It's nighttime. Sitting out with my friends at the Rivers table, and people are like talking, and I'm like, what's going on? My sister comes around the building, pulls me aside. She's like, Alicia, did you take a big shit? I was like, no. She's like, because everybody's talking about this. I was like, she said it was on your floor. I didn't know that my shit had suddenly gone celebrity. It did. There were people that were sitting, and picture, all this is going on, nobody knows it was me. So I'm sitting here, and everybody's talking about, like, everybody outside. There were, like, maybe 50 people outside, Everybody was talking about it, showing each other pictures, because girls had gone to the toilet and taken pictures of it. We're showing their friends. Go figure. Don't know why this was such a big hit, but they called it the Big Kahuna of 6.
How original.
I know, right? Big Kahuna. And it was only because I had asked, I said, why are they calling it Big Kahuna? And they said, well, every semester somebody does this. We don't know who does it or if it's many people. Somebody does
Apparently
this.
Many people.
Apparently. And they said, this happens every semester. Somebody will leave a turd that they cannot flush, and, stuff happens. So, I watched as people talked about it and had pictures passing it around. I'm just sitting there like, oh, God.
How'd your sister know?
My sister knew because she knew I hadn't been eating right. And she knew that I was constipated because I'd been telling her that my stomach was hurting. So she was wondering, and plus it was on the 2nd floor of my dorm.
I would have thought it was you
yeah.
if it was on the same campus.
But anyway, I go up, and I'm trying to forget about it. Next morning I wake up, and our RA knocks on the door and says, we have a impromptu hall meeting. And I said, is something wrong? She said, well, we've got some things we got to discuss. And I was like, okay, so we have a hall meeting. Well, every floor has an RA that they call meetings for, and you go down to the rec room in the mezzanine, and you have meetings. Well, they called that meeting specifically for that. My RA could not stop laughing. It was so humiliating. Nobody knew who it was. Nobody knew who this was. To this day, they don't know. So, I was just sitting there while everybody's talking about it. I didn't know what trouble I put them through until they were asking who did it.
It's a shit,
and
God!
I know, they finally concluded, like, they called in, they thought somebody had an animal in the dorm. And that they took the drop-in.
Is this how dead life is in Alabama? They make a big hall meeting over a shit?
I guess so.
Seriously?
They called in people to come see if there were animals in our...
How big was this shit?
Don't ask.
Just tell me. Give me a range.
It was pretty big.
No, that long? Like,
I guess. I don't remember.
That thick?
Yeah, it was pretty thick.
That thick.
Anyway, so we're not talking about my. Anyway, so I'm sitting there, and all these girls are sitting around talking about it, and I'm just like, talking, trying to pass this off like I'm just another person that's randomly listening in on this shit. And so, for weeks, it gets forgotten about. Everybody forgets it. So, I decide that I'm going to sit downstairs, and I listen in on these two girls, and they're talking about this MySpace page. And I'm like, what are they talking about? They said it's called Mr. Pooh. I'm like, well, this is kind of stupid. Ironically, I decide to go look up the MySpace page, and sure enough, there it is. Somebody who had snapped a picture of it had made a MySpace profile for it.
Woo!
So my turd officially has MySpace profile forever.
Everybody, make sure you add it as a friend. Be on Facebook
A lot
soon.
of people did too. A lot of people from my school. My poo ended up having 300 something friends.
That's what happens when you live in Alabama. Shit gets real.
Shit gets real. So what is yours?
This is embarrassing. This is really embarrassing, and this is just for this. This is just to prove that I am never going to show this to certain people. But I did it's twice. Yes, for some reason it involves sexual things,
Of course.
but only with myself. Okay, so there's this time where I was sitting on my bed, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna. So, I'm rubbing one in, and and I look up for inspiration, and my room was full of, the Land of Bloom and Johnny Depp, all over. I had Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean all over my room. Keira Knightley in there, too. And I'm sitting, and there's this picture, I'm sure a lot of people have seen, of Johnny Depp. He's, playing the piano, and he has a cigarette in his mouth. It's black and white. Well, I had that over my bed. So I'm sitting and I'm looking up at this picture, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this, yeah. So right before I orgasm, the picture decides to fall off the wall and bash me in the head, and I felt like he knew. So I panicked. I'm just screaming, ah, ah. My mom's like, what's wrong? I'm like, don't come in, my pants are down. And I had to, tell her what happened because I shouted my pants were down. And then, following that, I was working at this theater. And I worked at 3, so no, you guys can't figure out what theater it was. And I was really, I was having a problem. And I was like, I can't work. I gotta get this feeling out of my pants. So I went, and I'm in box office, okay? I can't leave box office. So I positioned myself just right so I can sit there and rub myself and get off in the box office. Not while customers were around. But I'm sitting there, so I'm like, okay, nobody can totally tell that I'm doing it because I stood completely still and I was just moving my fingers. And as soon as I'm about to get to that point, this old couple comes walking around the corner. Excuse me, do you know when Harry Potter is supposed to be on? And I'm just like, yeah, give me a minute. Just kneeled down. I was like, oh God. And I'm shaking because I was in mid-orgasm, and I just, it's when you have to stop right there. It's the worst feeling in the world. So yes, that's my two embarrassing stories that involve masturbation.
Nice. All right. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.